Today we will be comparing episode 512, Never My Love, with A Breath of Snow and Ashes and The Fiery Cross. Now, if you haven't read the books or watched the episode, be advised, spoilers are coming. The title of this episode, Never My Love, is a 1967 song by The Association that plays throughout the episode. Now, I myself have been a victim of kidnapping and rape, and I felt like they really handled this episode well and showed that out-of-body experience that you have when you go through these traumatic moments. Most of what's covered in this episode is in A Breath of Snow and Ashes, and it's part 4, Abduction. Now, our show gives us a very evocative, visceral, out-of-body experience that Claire is having, and there's a lot of things in this experience that you may not have noticed. First off, it is obviously cutting in and out of maybe the late 60s or early 70s. And Claire is walking through this house. There is a copy of the Modern Building magazine that we see in the title card of episode 5 of this season, Perpetual Adoration. We see at one point Claire holding an orange, which is reminiscent of the orange she gets from King Louis in season 2. We see a dragonfly toy being played with, which obviously is akin to Dragonfly and Amber, our second novel in the series. We also see Claire sitting on the couch in front of a painting, and it's an artist representation of their big house at the Ridge in the 18th century. While the episode doesn't explicitly say this, I feel like the house that Claire is in, walking around, and that all the family is coming to is at Fraser's Ridge, be it 200 years in the future. Now, in this hallucination that Claire is having, our other characters, there's some certain elements that I found very interesting. First off is Jamie. Right before the Battle of Culloden, when Jamie sends Claire back to the future. In our show, she actually says, "Come with me." But from our show and our books, we know that Jamie can't hear the buzzing. He cannot travel through time. So just the fact that Jamie is there in her out-of-body experience, but in the future, is quite interesting. Now with Ian, we actually see him as a soldier. He comes to Claire and Jamie's door in full uniform, and so I thought that was a very interesting take on Ian's character. Fergus and Jocasta share a similarity because in Claire's vision, Fergus has both of his hands, and Jocasta is there, and she's no longer blind. We also see Murtaugh, which in our novels, he died many years before, but in our show, they kept him alive, and he died in this season in episode 7, The Ballad of Roger Mack. Now, there was one element of Claire's hallucination that I wasn't quite sure where they were going with it, and it's that Bree and Roger have not shown up at this Thanksgiving dinner yet. And so I'm just wondering if they put that in there because at this moment, Claire thinks that Roger, Bree, and Jem made it back to the future, so they're almost like in this limbo in between the past and the future, even though Claire's vision is in the future. So I'm not quite sure why that was part of it, but you may not have caught this, and I didn't notice it until the second viewing of this episode. The police officers that come to the door telling Claire that Bree, Roger, and Jemmy have died in a car accident are Lionel Brown and Hodgepile. I hadn't noticed that, and I was like, whoa. In our novel, the reason for Claire being kidnapped is actually quite different than in our show. If you will recall, there was a quick moment in Brownsville in episode 504 that Fergus tells Lionel Brown that they make whiskey on the Ridge. I don't think that actually needed to be in there in the show, but it actually makes much more sense for our book version. In our novel, Marcelly and Claire are at the still when this gang of robbers comes upon them. Where they make the whiskey is not where the whiskey is stored. So when the gang comes upon them, they want to know where the storehouse of the whiskey is. Now there's more factions going on and disagreements in the gang. It's not a one-minded kind of gang. The leader of the gang, Hodgepile, wants Claire to show him where the whiskey is kept. Now Lionel Brown is there, but he's like, you can't take her. Don't you know who she is? She's Jamie Fraser's wife. And that guy, he's gonna go crazy on us. He's gonna kill us. You cannot take her. In our show, however, it's Lionel Brown who initiates this abduction on Claire on purpose. He's mad about Claire's pseudonym, Dr. Rowling's, and the information printed in the newspaper. And so he comes to kidnap her on purpose. Meanwhile, in our show, Bree, Roger, and Jemmy have attempted going back to the future. When we catch up with them, you see they didn't make it because Ian is still there. So the four of them go back to the ridge and they see that the fiery cross has been lit. If you'll recall from episode 1, Jamie says he won't light the fiery cross again until it's time to go to war. And I love how they had Jamie decide when it's time to go to war in the show. Thought that was really cool. There's a couple characters that are both in our show and our book. One is named Tebby, and Claire sees him that maybe he's a potential ally because he gives her food, and he even says, remember, Tebby was good to you, he gave you food. But also he's superstitious of her, and he knows her to be some sort of conjure woman, knows her reputation, and, thinks it's bad luck to have her with them and, kidnap her and all this stuff. Now, Claire works out with Tebby to, when they are crossing this creek, that he'll let her go so she can swim away. But the plan gets thwarted by Hodgepile, and he actually gags Claire, which obviously makes it impossible to swim away because she won't be able to breathe underwater with a gag in her mouth. So I actually don't think we see Tebby again. I do not recall seeing him in the bodies after this all. So I'm thinking he got away. Now the other character is Donner, who is a Native American, but there's something different about him. And some of the things he says to Claire, about the stars being really bright as opposed to where I come from. Oh, it looks like the man on the moon. And then he says one thing later on that's very clear. Do you know the name Ringo Starr? And Claire definitely knows in that moment, okay, he's from the future. If you recall from a previous season, Claire is lost in the woods and she's visited by a spirit, and she finds this skull that actually had cavities filled, with metal. And so she knows that the skull must have been the person's spirit. And she finds out later on that his name was Ottertooth. So she brings this up to Donner, and she says, look, I'll tell you everything I know as long as you help me escape. In our novel, Donner helps Claire a bit, and he saves her from choking to death because her nose has been broken at this point, and she says, you can't put that gag back in my mouth or I will suffocate. So at least he does that. But she tells him, look, you better help me escape, and just so you know, my husband will be coming, and if you're here, he will kill you. In our show, Donner doesn't help Claire at all. Now, both in our show and in our novel, we don't see Donner's body, so I'm just going to assume that he did heed Claire's warning from the novel and escape, even though he didn't help Claire escape. One other part from the novel is that Lionel Brown falls and injures himself before they cross the creek. And he's in a stretcher, and Claire tends his wounds, but he tells everyone, we need to kill her now. So now we see Lionel Brown's more evil colors come out towards Claire in our novel, which we hadn't officially seen to this point. In our novel, The Fiery Cross, the prologue is a monologue that Jamie reads in the episode. I have lived through war and lost much. I know what's worth a fight and what is not. Honor and courage are matters of the bone, and what a man will kill for, he will sometimes die for too. For the sake of love alone, I would walk through fire again. I love how Jamie makes the decision. It's time to go to war. There's this song that is played a couple times earlier in the season, and the bagpipes, and there's this intensity. And there's a moment that I thought was just great that they showed. They had Ian shaving his head and war paint, and it was just so cool. Now, once Jamie and everyone finds the gang and finds Claire, the book and the show are pretty much exactly alike. So there's several lines that are taken directly from the book. Jamie telling Claire, "You are alive, you are whole." He also says, "There is an oath upon her. She may not kill, save if it is for mercy or her life. It is myself who kills for her." "And I," said a tall figure behind him, softly, "Ian." And they added in that Fergus says, "And I, milady," which I thought that was a great addition. And then Jamie says, "Kill them all." And I couldn't help cheering from the couch when I watched this. It was just like, yes! We also see Roger come into his own in this episode. And he's never been a warrior, but he brings up the oath from the Fiery Cross that Jamie says to him, "Stand by my side." And Roger realizes his oath to Jamie means so much to him. It doesn't mean it doesn't weigh on him, though, and he ends up killing one of the gang members, and he has to tell Bree about it later because it really weighs on him. Now, both in our novel and in our show, they end up taking Lionel Brown back to the Ridge. But the way it goes down is quite different. In our novel, it is actually Mrs. Bug that kills Brown. She has been in charge of looking after him and making sure, he's living while they figure out what to do with him. But he makes one too many comments and she just snaps and kills him. Our show, however, actually has Marcelly being the one who's taking care of him in the surgery. Claire comes in and you can feel the rage come over her, but she says, "I will do you no harm." But then Marcelly comes over and she says, "Claire has made an oath, but I've made no such oath." And then she kills Brown. It's really intense. One thing I'd mentioned in a previous Outlandish comparison was that I was missing the exchange of Jamie and Claire that's on the last page of the Fiery Cross. Well, they brought it back, and it was very apropos because it was the end of season 5 and the end of book 5, where Jamie says, "When the day shall come that we do part, if my last words are not 'I love you,' you'll ken it was because I didn't have time." I was so happy that they closed the season with the closing words of the book. I think this episode was incredible. I think it was one of the absolute best of the entire Outlander show. I really loved when Claire said, "I've survived all of these things, and I won't. I refuse to be shattered by this." I can relate to that so much, and I just want to encourage you that whatever you've been through in your life, as long as you're still here, you survive, you can get through this, and you don't have to be shattered by your circumstances. I'm gonna go back and get all the episodes I missed from season 5 of The Fiery Cross and some of A Breath of Snow and Ashes. Thank you so much for being here on Outlandish Comparison. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I just want to encourage you to have hope and have courage that you can handle whatever it is that life throws at you. Take care.
Mary of soul, she said.